After my father, who lived in an enviably luxurious mansion, passed away, my mother-in-law made an unbelievable statement as if she had been waiting for this moment. This house is really wonderful, but we should get rid of the pictures of strangers soon. I couldn't hide my surprise at my mother-in-law's comment. Huh? Perhaps you haven't heard from Ben yet? We're going to live here from now on. What? Here? Why? We and Ben will live in this house. What? When I looked at my husband in a hurry, he was smiling sarcastically. Well, it's fine for you to live in this residence too. We'll live here together, you and my family. You're the only daughter of the owner of this house, your father, so it's only natural that you'll inherit it, right? I've been looking forward to this moment for a long time. From now on, you'll take care of my father in this luxurious place. Faced with such an absurd demand, I even lost the will to resist. Fine, do whatever you want with this house. If you want to live here, please do. While my husband laughed loudly, my daughter quietly spoke. But Mom, didn't Grandpa say he wanted this mansion to be demolished after he passed away? Yes, but if your dad and his parents want to live here, that's fine, no? My daughter said with a cold gaze at her father. That's right. Enjoy it while you can. I, Kathy, am 58 years old. I always visit my hometown on weekends. In my hometown, time passes slowly as usual. The only view from the window of my parents' home is the endlessly vast sea. This residence is located on the coastline, creating the illusion that it is directly connected to the sea. My father, sitting in a chair by the window, quietly muttered with the sunset behind him. This might be the last time I see this scenery. My father, who is over 80 years old, has weakened and struggles even while standing up. He aged rapidly after losing my mother 3 years ago. Until recently, he was immersed in sorrow, but now, realizing his end is near, he seems somewhat at peace. He was hospitalized for a long time due to an illness, but now he's back home. Recently, with the support of home care, he's been managing to live alone at home. I can only visit on weekends because of my job. It might be time to go to a care facility, but I want to stay here. Kathy, I'm sorry for the trouble. It's okay. This place is important to you and Mom. Remember how we always went to the seaside as a family? We enjoyed barbecues in the garden too. That's really nostalgic. This summer, we should all gather here again. I hesitated and middled my words. When summer comes, I'll probably be with Mom, my father said with a slightly sad smile. I promise to visit again next week and headed home. The place I currently live in is an old 3-room apartment in a housing complex. Whenever I leave my hometown, I feel oppressed by the cluttered and narrow space in my apartment. It's mostly filled with my husband's belongings, which are more like long-abandoned unnecessary items. But touching them would only provoke his anger. When will dinner be ready? My husband asked, glued to the TV, sipping his beer. Did you go to your father's house again? It's strange for a woman nearing 60 to be so devoted to her father every week. I'm worried about my dad's health. Is that wrong? Don't make excuses. But I guess I can understand why you go to that house. My husband smirked and indicated he agreed. Then Ben, you should also visit sometimes. You owe it to him. Dad doesn't have much time left. There's no fun in going there. It's not like the old days when he'd welcome us with plenty of drinks. My presence won't extend your father's life, but if I were into surfing, it would have been valuable as a holiday house where I could stay for free. That mansion is truly magnificent. My husband, clearly not the surfing type, laughed while lying down. Even such a sarcastic husband always spoke highly of my family home. There's no doubt that it was a magnificent mansion. I didn't particularly notice it growing up, but as an adult, I came to realize the luxury of my childhood home. The third-floor living room, bathed in light, was spacious enough for children to play chase. My parents, who were very sociable, had a total of 5 rooms on the first and second floors, often hosting friends. As a child, I had many happy memories from sleepovers with friends. My parents were always cheerful and welcoming to everyone. But now, it's okay. I'll just visit with Abby sometimes. Do you not think that inconveniences me? Planning to leave me with nothing but cold leftovers? If you must visit your folks, I lead out. Just give me $100 for the meal. My whole body suddenly became hot. Staying any longer with my husband, I feared I might blurt out angry words, so I quietly escaped to the bathroom. Washing my face roughly, I tried to mask my rage. But looking at the mirror, I was shocked to see my reflection. I looked older than I had imagined. I work full-time during the week and spend weekends visiting my father. But I'm busy with household chores even then. My daughter, Abby, is in high school and doesn't require much attention. But it seems my fatigue has been accumulating without my notice. At what point will this lifestyle end? I thought, with my husband's face flashing across my mind. It looked like he was the main source of my exhaustion. At that moment, my cell phone in my pocket began to ring. It was my mother-in-law, persistent by nature, calling repeatedly until I answered. Despite having a bad feeling, I pressed the answer button. Hello, Kathy? I heard that you have been leaving Ben behind to visit your hometown frequently. Who's taking care of Ben while you're away? She accused without pause. You have always neglected Abby when working, and now you're neglecting your husband too? What a terrible wife. My husband must have shared his grievances with her. To him, his mother was an unwavering supporter. I'm sorry, but my father has been unwell, so I'm dedicating my weekends to caring for him. If he's unwell, he should be in a facility or hospital. But that would be a financial burden. But then again, it'd be problematic if he died alone in that house. Sigh, having one's life unnecessarily prolonged is also troublesome. She probably knows that my father's time is limited. Yet, such remarks filled me with disdain beyond anger. Fortunately, my daughter was supportive, frequently accompanying me to visit my father and helping with simple chores at home. Only my husband was indifferent to chores like dealing with laundry left out in the rain. He saw household tasks as the wife's responsibility and never helped. Moreover, he recently complained about the cooking being lousy and dust accumulating at home. I couldn't help but think, is visiting my father once a week too much? These were clearly the result of his sarcastic remarks on my visits home, but I didn't want to have regrets. Months passed, and my father peacefully left this world. One morning, while my daughter and I were visiting my father, we found him collapsed on the third-floor balcony. His favorite spot, the expansive balcony, offered an unobstructed view of the sea. I'm glad he got to spend his last days at home, as he wished. The funeral proceeded hastily, leaving little time for mourning. In the end, Ben and the in-laws didn't bother to attend, did they? The funeral was set on a weekday, so my husband said he had work, and the in-laws declared, if Ben can't go, we won't attend either. However, upon returning to the mansion after the funeral, my husband and in-laws were there. Did you finish work early to come here? If you were quicker, you might have been able to send off my father. I'm not interested in that. What? Then why are you here? My husband confidently sat down onto the sofa in the living room. The in-laws, who hadn't visited in a long time, meticulously inspected the house, even turning picture frames on the shelves face down. This house is really wonderful, but we should get rid of the pictures of strangers soon. I couldn't hide my astonishment at my mother-in-law's comment. Huh? Perhaps you haven't heard from Ben yet? We're going to live here from now on. What? Here? Why? We and Ben will live in this house. What? When I looked at my husband in a hurry, he was smiling sarcastically. They were trying to take over my family home. Hey, don't look at me like I'm the enemy. I'm not trying to take anything from you. What do you mean? Well, it's fine for you to live in this residence too. We'll live here together, you and my family. You're the only daughter of the owner of this house, your father, so it's only natural that you'll inherit it, right? I've been looking forward to this moment for a long time. From now on, you'll take care of my father in this luxurious place. His demand was absurd. Struggling to find words, my father-in-law spoke as if it were obvious. I heard that you have been taking care of your father every weekend. If you enjoy caregiving so much, I'm counting on you. My knees have started to hurt recently, but he was walking without any problem. It seemed he was using caregiving as an excuse. What he really wanted was help with the housework. My mother-in-law also smiled maliciously at me. Since it's decided, let's all live happily together. It feels like a dream come true to be able to live in this mansion. Things progressed without waiting for my response. Not only me, but my daughter was also dumbfounded, faced with such an unreasonable claim. I completely lost the will to resist. Fine, do whatever you want with this house. If you want to live here, please do. Smiles appeared on my husband's and his parents' faces. Seeing that, I spoke with even more determination. But Abby and I won't live here. Please, go ahead. While taking my daughter's hand, I urged her, let's go, Abby. Really? Okay. It'll be less stressful and more comfortable without you here. Ha ha ha. My husband laughed loudly. I was treated like a housemaid. Easily discarded. Apparently, just acquiring the mansion was satisfying enough for them. They were laughing loudly. While my husband laughed, my daughter quietly spoke up. But Mom, didn't Grandpa say he wanted this mansion to be demolished after he passed away? Yes, but if your dad and his parents want to live here, that's fine, no? My daughter said with a cold gaze at her father. That's right. Enjoy it while you can. 3 months later, the situation drastically changed. The house is in trouble. My husband urgently contacted me. When I rushed to the scene, it was just as I expected. The house was leaning. The walls were cracked. Why is this happening? More notably, the vast terrace connected to the third-floor living room was gone. Where did the terrace go? I asked. We removed it because your father passed away there. We wanted to get rid of the discomfort. That's why the house is leaning. The house leaning is related to the removal of the terrace? That can't be. At this rate, the house might collapse. Hearing that, I sighed quietly. The plan was to demolish this house after my father passed away, so it doesn't matter if it's falling apart. It can't be okay if it's falling apart. We are living here. My husband and in-laws blamed me. They still didn't seem to understand how serious the situation of the house was. My mother-in-law approached me aggressively. How can you say it's okay if it's falling apart? It's your irreplaceable childhood home, Kathy. Do something about it. There's nothing I can do. This house is infested with termites, I explained, and they shook their heads in disbelief. After losing my mother, my father lost his drive and was unable to maintain the house. He was in the hospital for a while, and the house was untouched for about 2 years. I ventilated it occasionally, but I never noticed any termite infestation. Although the house looked splendid from the outside, the interior was crumbling. When my father and I learned about it, we were initially shocked, but my father quickly changed his perspective. What's important is not the building itself, but that the memories continue to live in our hearts, he said. My father's remaining time was short, and he accepted the house's condition without making any special efforts, as his days in it were numbered. No matter how damaged, the house wouldn't collapse immediately unless there was a major earthquake. However, removing the balcony might have caused the house to lose its balance, I mentioned, and my husband turned red with anger and yelled, "How dare you leave us in such a dangerous house?" My mother-in-law continued, "We were deceived by you. You lured us into living in this crumbling ruin. What were you scheming? Such a wicked daughter-in-law." Despite being harshly criticized, I didn't offer them the house myself. You forcibly took it over, and now that there's an issue, it's my fault? I don't recall encouraging you to live here. If you're dissatisfied, feel free to leave. We don't want this rundown house. We'll move out immediately. My mother-in-law glared at me, her harsh words unending. The house was luxurious only in appearance and no substance. As compensation for deceiving us, you should pay for our moving costs. Fortunately, we haven't unpacked yet and most of our belongings are still on the first floor. I want to leave this place quickly. Are you by any chance using the large room next to the entrance as a storage space? Yes, that's right. You left your belongings in that room? Oh, dear. My mother-in-law, puzzled by my reaction, stared at me. Sensing something from my troubled look, she quickly ran down to the first floor. Soon after, we heard a scream, "Ah!" I found my mother-in-law looking depressed in the storage room on the first floor. Did you know the room was moldy? Since my father became ill and the house was vacant for a long time, this room became prone to mold due to the dampness of not getting enough sunlight. As expected, the cardboard boxes were damp and the bottoms were covered in mold. My luxury bags. My mother-in-law lifted a mold-covered bag. Wait a minute, my precious records. My father-in-law's record covers were also damaged by mold. What about my comics? Their valuable items were all moldy. Naturally, their anger was directed at me, but I refrained from arguing. You were the ones who occupied this house without permission. They eventually gave up on their mold-infested belongings and returned to the cluttered three-room apartment. The three of them headed to that apartment because the in-laws' former apartment had already been given away. Huh? It's messy as usual but seems somewhat tidier. My husband muttered, tilting his head. My daughter and I passed by my husband and left the house. Maybe it looks spacious because all our stuff is gone. We're leaving this place. What? My husband was surprised. Yes. And I want you to sign this document, I said, handing him the divorce papers. As my husband raised objections, my in-laws yelled, "Ditch that woman." And I managed to get the signature. In those 3 months, my daughter and I found a new home and prepared for the divorce. The moment they showed their true colors, I felt relieved to sever ties with them. Their scheme to take over my family home ended in a monumental failure as the house collapsed. I heard that my hot-tempered in-laws and husband were constantly fighting in their small apartment. Just a few days after the divorce, it already felt like a distant world to me. The leaning family home was eventually demolished. The grand mansion I inherited from my father gave me the courage to take a new step forward, despite my grievances with my husband. It prompted the change I was hesitant to make. Now, 10 years later, I live together with my daughter's family in our new, small house by the sea. Grandma, let's go to the sea. My grandchild said, "All right, everyone, have you got your hats and floaties ready? Then let's go." I responded, and as my grandchildren pulled my hands, we headed to the sea once again. I've sold this house to my parents. Let's get a divorce. I don't need you anymore. Phil pointed at me, urging me to leave the house quickly. After that, he continued to throw insulting words at me. My in-laws joined in, laughing along. However, I remained undisturbed by such comments and calmly accepted the need to leave. I had a plan. After quickly preparing my belongings, I left the house. Those three still didn't understand the true hardship that was about to unfold. My name is Rachel Wagner. I'm in my 50s. After many years of marriage, my children are already independent. Although I used to work as a regular office worker, I am now a teacher of handmade accessory making, a hobby of mine thanks to a friend's introduction. For me, getting this job was a stroke of luck. I enjoy my beloved craft, surrounded by kind and caring students. While some may frown upon continuing a hobby as a profession, I feel fortunate to be in such a wonderful environment. I met Phil at the company where I used to work. Although we were at different companies, frequent interactions due to business dealings led to a mutual attraction that led to dating and eventually marriage. 3 years after getting married, I gave birth to a healthy boy. He graduated from a top university and secured a job at a major company. He now lives with his very attractive wife. As a parent, I feel unparalleled joy. However, my daily life took a turn for the worse. Decades into our marriage, with our child out on his own, Phil's once gentle nature had vanished. "Hey, Rachel, isn't dinner ready yet?" Before I knew it, I was being treated like a convenient housekeeper, constantly ordered and directed. Worse yet, his demands changed daily. One day, he complained the soup was too strong, so I made it lighter the next day, only to be yelled at for it being too weak. Experimenting, I served the same taste every day, only to be constantly criticized for it being too strong or too weak. I had felt it before, but perhaps he was just amusing himself by troubling me. That thought was disappointing. How childish he seemed. No matter what I did, Phil would quickly become angry, frequently hurling disrespectful words at me. Living this way made me desperately want to leave, to escape from Phil at the earliest opportunity. I've thought about it countless times since he changed, but there's a reason I can't leave. It's because of an outstanding mortgage. Phil quit his job suddenly without reason and now spends his days idly at home. Despite this, he never helps with the housework. When I return from work, I find a floor littered with empty alcohol cans and snack wrappers. As a result, we're getting by on my earnings. In truth, we had just recently rebuilt our house. I provided all the funds for it. I keep the household account book, monitoring our financial situation. I've been diligently saving up, gathering funds for the house construction. I can't just leave the house I worked so hard to build. If I leave, it becomes Phil's. On top of the mortgage, there's another important reason. This house is a place filled with my hopes and dreams. The exterior, interior, and facilities were all designed according to my wishes. What I particularly like is the spaciousness of the kitchen. Our kitchen is very spacious, making it a comfortable environment for cooking. During meetings with the designer, Phil frequently interjected his opinions, but when I firmly said, I'm providing the funds, so I'd like my wishes to be considered a bit, he fell silent. Months passed, and despite various difficulties, our house was finally completed. Not all my wishes could be met due to budget constraints, but still, our ideal home was built. I am very satisfied with the outcome. However, on the flip side, we ended up with a large mortgage due to going over budget. Having a substantial mortgage in my 50s is tough, but thinking about my dream home gives me strength. Despite it being a new home, Phil seemed dissatisfied that his opinions weren't much reflected. He complained, "This facility is unnecessary. It's a waste of money." But he gradually stopped grumbling when I ignored him. Instead, he started to leave trash around and deliberately dirtied the room. Was it out of spite? When will this situation improve? These thoughts weigh on me as I go through my days. A few months after building the house, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. There were no visitors scheduled for today. Who could it be? As I started to move slowly towards the entrance, Phil suddenly stood up as if he realized something and hurried toward the door. There was a sense of anticipation in his behavior. After a while, cheerful and lively conversation could be heard from the entrance, growing louder over time. When the living room door opened slowly, unexpected visitors were there. What? Father and mother. Yes, there stood my somewhat difficult to handle father-in-law, Henry, and mother-in-law, Debbie. When we first met, they had thrown demeaning words at me. At our wedding, they even complained about trivial things. Their interference continued afterward, causing me much distress. Recently, our contact had decreased, and I thought we had found some peace. But then this visit happened, even though I politely said hello. They passed by as if I was air, deliberately bumping into my shoulder. "Look, isn't this house wonderful? I want you to see various things here." Phil eagerly spoke. "What a nice house. How happy one must be living in such a lovely place. The kitchen is so spacious and functional," exclaimed my mother-in-law. "Indeed, it's enviable. I can see why you two would be comfortable here," praised my father-in-law. Phil showed them around the house, explaining features that piqued their interest. When they returned to the living room, there was a satisfied smile on my in-laws' faces. However, in contrast to the cheerful atmosphere, Phil scolded me loudly. "Hey, aren't the coffee and snacks ready yet? How can you make my parents wait?" Rushed by his angry voice, I hurried to prepare the coffee and snacks. But since there was no prior notice of the visit, I had to serve whatever snacks I had on hand. This made them upset. What kind of joke is this when your husband's parents are visiting? Really, always a petty woman. They expressed their dissatisfaction but finished all the coffee and snacks provided. "This house seems really comfortable to live in. Dad and Mom, you're always welcome. Don't hesitate to come." After that, they left without saying thanks for the meal or anything else. Ultimately, their attention was solely on Phil, only glancing at me when expressing their complaints. After they left, I realized something. It had been a long time since I saw Phil laugh so brightly. From that day on, at Phil's invitation, they began visiting frequently. Initially, it was about twice a month, but gradually it increased to once a week, and eventually, they started coming almost daily. Most of what they said during their visits were complaints about me. Phil never defended me. He just nodded along with his parents' remarks. He even agreed with his parents' opinions and complained about me. Rachel really doesn't listen to what I say. It's troubling me. Rachel is really a high-maintenance person. I've felt it since we first met, but to see her troubling my son like this, I never intended to trouble them. In fact, I am the one who is troubled. Yet, I couldn't convey this and merely apologized. Their visits seemed to continue. I couldn't be sure because they visited when I wasn't around, and I didn't see them every day. Nevertheless, they seemed to drink alcohol during the day, and when I came home, empty cans were scattered on the floor. The newly bought rug had stains from spilled drinks. Could you at least clean up the empty cans? The new house smells of alcohol, and there are stains on the floor, which is troublesome. Quiet. You should just keep earning money in silence. Just do as I say, okay? Understand? Really now. It seemed he didn't realize who was earning the money for the alcohol. Besides alcohol, Phil also spent money on gambling. Occasionally, I would find crumpled betting tickets next to the alcohol cans. When I realized Phil was gambling, I tried to advise him. We didn't have financial leeway in the first place. If he continued to waste money on gambling, our situation would only worsen. It's one thing if it were his income, but using the money I earned, I feel more sadness than anger. Weeks have passed since his parents began visiting frequently. They would still come when I was not home. How should I turn this situation around? Sometimes when I came home early from work, I would find them brazenly using my home's facilities. I let out a surprised "ah," and when they noticed me, they clicked their tongues. My presence seemed to be an annoyance to them. Yet, this is my place. There's no reason for me to be treated as an unwanted presence. How should I overcome this difficult situation? I was already at my limit taking care of Phil, let alone dealing with his parents. Finally, I decided to confront Phil and his parents and began to formulate a plan. A few weeks later, they unusually visited while I was home. "Hello. It's rare for you to come when I'm here," I said sarcastically, and they gave me a sharp look. "If we knew you were here, we would have changed our visiting time. You always look so unremarkable." It was clear that my presence made them uncomfortable. They brushed past me and entered the living room confidently. "There you are. We've been waiting." Phil greeted his parents with a smile and led them to the kitchen. They seemed to think of this place as their home. In the kitchen, Debbie happily operated the equipment. "This kitchen is nice. I can't wait to use it. The food Mom makes here will surely be exquisite." After tinkering with the appliances, they said, "Let's check the bathroom next," and proceeded there. Inspecting the facilities of our house, which they had visited frequently, felt strange. It was as if they were doing a final check. With a look of anticipation, they left the house. "What were you doing? That's none of your business. Keep your mouth shut." Even when I asked what he had been up to, Phil told me nothing. But it doesn't matter if he doesn't tell me. The reason is that I was fully aware of what Phil and his parents were planning. Phil tried to keep his plan from me, but his attempts were so comical that I couldn't help but smirk when he wasn't looking. 1 week later, when I returned from work, a large truck was parked in front of our house. It had "Moving Center" written on its side. When I made eye contact with Phil standing next to the truck, he completely ignored me and went inside the house with the movers. Uncertain whether it was the right time to enter, I stood outside and watched just as his parents arrived. "Oh, you're already here, Dad. Quick, let's go inside." After a brief glance at me, my in-laws, treating me as if I were invisible, entered the house without exchanging any words with me. Minutes passed, and the movers left. The three of them watched the truck leave with satisfaction. Once the truck was out of sight, they turned their attention to me. "Oh, Rachel, you're back? We didn't notice at all." "Really? When did you get back?" Pretending to be innocent, they approached me. "We need to talk. Please, come inside." As I stepped in, I noticed that most of the furniture had been replaced with items from Phil's parents' house. My beloved shelves and desk were gone. likely taken away by the movers. Sitting on the newly replaced sofa, the three of them stared at me with an eerie smile. "We have an important discussion to make. You have no right to oppose now, so just listen quietly." An important talk. When I questioned back, Phil, with a sneering tone, said, "I've sold this house to my parents. Let's get a divorce. I don't need you anymore." As soon as he finished his sentence, his parents chimed in, "Exactly right. So, from today, you are a stranger to us. Strangers should leave promptly." Debbie's words were followed by Phil and Henry's laughter. "Did you hear that? You're a stranger, so get out." "Mom, that's really funny." "Yes, she's a stranger now, so she should leave quickly. This house is no longer yours." While saying this, Phil handed me the already filled out divorce papers. However, I wasn't fazed at all. I had anticipated all of this. "Understood. Then let's proceed with the divorce. I'll sign the divorce papers now." I signed quickly, placed my wedding ring on the table, stood up, and declared, "I will move out now." My calm demeanor seemed to dumbfound the remaining three. There's a solid reason why I could remain so composed. I had installed surveillance cameras all around the house. When his parents started visiting frequently and kept talking about living here, I grew suspicious. Their increasing visits and specific timings raised my doubts, making me suspect a conspiracy with Phil, which led me to install the cameras. At first, I hesitated. Is it permissible to monitor one's family like this? I feared that if nothing untoward was happening, I would be the one criticized. But, driven by daily stress, I finally decided to install the cameras. I could check the footage from these cameras on my smartphone at any time. Whenever I took a break, I started checking the footage. On the first day, there was no significant change. His parents visited, and they engaged in casual conversation with Phil. The focus of the conversation was Phil's daily grievances, and his parents just nodded sadly. "So you've been feeling that way. Truly, she is no good, causing her husband such distress." The video also captured their voices clearly. Have they forgotten who have been supporting the household? Since installing the cameras, I've been pondering how they will manage their living after I'm gone. Days later, the screen showed Phil and his parents in an unusually cheerful mood. What had happened? Listening carefully, it sounded like Phil was discussing selling his house to his parents. When I first heard this, I thought it was a joke, but the discussions about selling the house continued the next day, and the day after that. It became undeniable that Phil indeed intended to sell the house to his parents. His parents were enthusiastic about the plan, discussing various projects like buying new furniture and making the house barrier-free. After hearing these conversations, I secretly began looking for a new house. The surveillance footage recorded the mover's schedule and the divorce plans. I prepared to move to a new place in time for the day I would be driven out. I also initiated the process to change the name on the mortgage contract. Since the divorce was decided, the house was no longer mine. Therefore, I thought it appropriate to transfer the payment responsibility to Phil and his parents. The mortgage I was paying was $2,800 a month. I doubted they could afford it, but that was to be their problem after we get divorced. I intended to refuse any requests for financial assistance. Driven out from home, I headed to my new residence. New furniture was already arranged there, and I was ready to start a new life. Exhausted, I collapsed into bed and fell into a deep sleep. Luckily, the next day was a holiday. Relieved to have started a new life away from Phil, I slept longer than usual and woke up past noon. I couldn't recall the last time I slept so soundly since getting married. I was hungry but still felt sleepy. Just as I considered sleeping a bit more, the doorbell rang. When I responded, I saw an enraged Phil and his parents. "What? Why are they here?" I didn't recall sharing this address. How did they find this place? Without giving me time to wonder, they barged in. Then, they suddenly produced a document. What's this? A notice for changing the mortgage name? Yes, that's right. I no longer live in that house, and effectively, we are strangers. Even so, right after I moved, they received the notice for the mortgage name change. They seemed shocked by the amount. "We have no income right now. How can we pay $2,800 a month?" That's right. Our pension isn't that much. They pleaded as if it was all my fault. Beside them, Phil nodded as if agreeing. No matter how much they blamed me, the situation wouldn't change. Maybe the house was a bit luxurious, but it's true that we went over the budget. But who was it that neglected to seek information and lazed around every day? Moreover, they themselves were trying to forcefully acquire a house that belonged to someone else. Had they known the actual amount of the mortgage, they probably would have reconsidered. While I remained silent, Phil, visibly angry, crumpled the document and approached me. Just so you know, I have no intention of paying such an amount. Leaving those words behind, he threw the document onto the floor. His parents remained silent about the situation, seemingly unaware of what non-payment of the mortgage would entail. I hadn't expected adults to lack such basic knowledge. You're free to choose not to pay, but do you understand the consequences? You'll end up having to pay it anyway, won't you? They seemed to misunderstand that I would ultimately be responsible for the payment. So, I elaborated on the specific consequences of not paying the mortgage. In fact, if you don't pay, late fees will be added. That means you'll need to spend more than $2,800 each month. Do you understand? Is that some kind of joke? Unbelievable. You're the ones who are misunderstanding. Why don't you check the details yourself? After that, Henry encouraged Phil to verify, and Debbie showed a similar response. Seconds passed, and Phil's expression gradually turned serious as he started operating his smartphone. I can't believe this is happening. I told you the cost would increase if you delay. You can find this information online. The three of them stared at Phil's smartphone. Debbie was the first to speak up. We don't have any money. Oh, right. What about savings? What's happening with the division of assets? There are none. Since Phil hasn't been working and squandered everything on gambling, there are no assets left to divide. I stated this definitively, causing Phil's face to turn even paler. So, I recommend you give up and look for a job. It's a waste of time to linger here. What do you mean? We've been together for years. Don't you think you should help out a bit? Do you realize how much we've supported you? I had no memory of being supported. I couldn't recall any assistance from his parents. I haven't received any help. I communicated this clearly and understandably, but they kept pleading, trying to rebuild our familial relationship and revive our marriage. I found it bothersome to even engage with them anymore. I forced the noisy trio outside and called the police, reporting that there were loud people outside. I treated their complaints as if it was someone else's problem. Indeed, in reality, they were now strangers. As a result, they were taken away by the police for causing a disturbance outside my house. After the police inquiry, they decided they couldn't afford the mortgage for economic reasons and moved to a small apartment out of town. I heard they finally understood the importance of working and were striving to find jobs, though unsuccessfully. Phil, however, managed to find a part-time job and was barely supporting the two of them with his modest income. As for me, I'm busy with work, but started a blog about my handmade crafts, which has doubled my income. The blog has received a lot of positive feedback, and I've been getting more requests to teach at handcraft workshops. Now, I prioritize living an independent life over marriage. During this time, I found the household ledger from when I was living a frugal life. The memories. I felt a wave of nostalgia. Those challenging days are now a valuable experience. I vowed to seize happiness with my own hands and put the ledger away.